Welcome to this week's installment of the Fitness Edda. I am your host, Eric Castiglione, owner and head coach of Viking Athletics. And this week, we've got much ado about calories. I've had numerous conversations with people that are not immersed in the fitness world over the last couple of days. There's still a ton of confusion surrounding calories. Are there good calories and bad calories, like the book out there called Good Calories, Bad Calories suggests? Are they created equal? I've also heard that a calorie is not a calorie. What is a calorie? We're going to clear all that up. So, our overview for today, we're going to start by defining what a calorie is. We're going to talk about good and bad calories. Spoiler alert, they don't exist. So, instead, we're actually going to talk about where the confusion comes from. Are there different kinds of calories? Spoiler alert, no. Where does the confusion come from? That's what we're going to dive into. And most importantly, the practical considerations for you. What do you do with this information? What most people are concerned with is either building muscle mass or losing body fat. How do calories come into play there? We're going to give you some practical considerations, and hopefully you enjoy this one. Hopefully it clears things up and we don't get too far into the technical jargon. And if you do enjoy this, feel free to share the video with people that you think could benefit. Give us a like, give us a subscribe. Really, we're just trying to get this information out there. And like I said in the start of this video series, there's a ton of misinformation in the health and wellness space, particularly when it comes to nutrition. So first off, some definitions. What is a calorie? A calorie with a lowercase c and a calorie with a capital C are both units of energy, and they are related. 1 calorie with a lowercase c is the amount of heat needed to raise 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. So initially the calorie was part of the metric system. It has since been expunged from it. It's no longer part. People use joules instead. But it did derive from the metric system, which is nice because everything, units of measure in the metric system, temperature, volume, and weight are all related nicely. So you see that 1 gram of water is 1 milliliter. So 1 milliliter of water weighs 1 gram. 1 calorie with a capital C is also known as a kilocalorie because it's equivalent to 1,000 calories with a lowercase c, which, if we take the definition of a lowercase c calorie, which is raising 1 gram of water by 1 degree, a kilocalorie or capital C calorie, which we're now going to use going forward in this presentation as calorie, will raise 1 kilogram of water by 1 degree Celsius, and that's, again, equivalent to 1,000 milliliters, which is 1 liter of water. So, again, we see that it's all nice and neat and interconnected there. And this, kilocalories, capital C, calorie, is the unit of measure that we use for food. So if you are looking at a food label and it says how many calories are in there, if you look at a Powerade bottle, I don't know if it still does, but when Powerade first came out and tried to challenge Gatorade, they called calories energy. They had that in parentheses next to it. And they're not wrong. It's a unit of energy. So calories on the food label is calorie with a capital C. And that's what we're going to talk about going forward because the other unit of measure is too small to be of any use for us. Are calories good and bad? I already gave you guys a spoiler. No. They are amoral. We as humans assign morality to calories that come from different sources, and we call some things empty calories. What does that all mean? Well, again, calories don't have morals. It's just energy. It exists. I wouldn't say that a joule is good or bad. Joule, not Jewel. It's just energy. Take any unit of measure. Is a degree Celsius good or bad? No, it just is. So same should go for calories, but we as human beings assign value. And where empty calories and the notion of empty calories comes from is we're talking about foods that are calorically dense versus nutrient dense. So nutrients are what we break foods down into. It's what is contained in food that we use for digestion, that we use for energy, for various processes in the body. And we have macronutrients and we have micronutrients. We'll get into macronutrients in a little bit. But micronutrients would be things like vitamins and minerals. And we need them to survive. Calorically dense foods are foods that have a high number of calories, so a ton of energy in them, but not a whole lot of nutrients. So my favorite example of this would be a deep fried Twinkie, because it's just so dense. A normal Twinkie is pretty small to begin with, but you stick that thing in a deep fryer and it shrinks down and it's literally a ball of grease. And we used to do this in college and they were delicious. If you could eat 2 of them, you were a champ, because it's so damn heavy. Even though it's small, you take a bite and it feels like you got a ball of lead just sitting in your stomach. And I don't even want to know how many calories were in there, but what is the nutritional value of a deep fried Twinkie? I'm getting no vitamins, no minerals. It's all artificial chemicals and deliciousness. So that would be the perfect example of what people think of as empty calories, because there's no nutritional value. It's just straight energy going into my body. Nutrient-dense food, on the other hand, you can eat a higher volume of this food and it doesn't have as many calories as something that's denser. So again, that's what density is the concentration in space. Another good example of this is a while back, the plant-based movement was trying to promote the idea that broccoli contained more protein than steak. Now, I don't know if they ever actually debunked this, and on a per gram basis, it may very well be true that broccoli has more protein than steak. And what I saw was for 300 grams, the graphic that I saw was 300 grams of steak contained 9 grams of protein, and 300 grams of broccoli contained 10 grams. So there was a slight disparity. But if we're talking pure volume here, a 300 gram steak, that's a 10-ounce steak. Go have a nice New York strip steak, not super filling, tolerable. You can eat that as part of another meal, and you're getting supposedly 9 grams of protein. I don't buy this, because I believe that 10 ounces of steak has a hell of a lot more than 9 grams of protein. But compare that with 300 grams of broccoli. That would be the equivalent of eating just about 2 cups of chopped broccoli. You're talking 1.8 cups. So I'm eating a shitload more food in terms of volume for the same amount of nutrients. So when we talk about nutrient-dense food, it is a greater volume that you can eat to have the same calories as something that's calorically dense that you'd eat in a smaller volume. So I can eat probably, I'll use my go-to meal as an example, which is roughly 980 calories for lunch and dinner, is 2 cups of white rice, a handful of spinach, 10 ounces of grilled chicken, half an avocado, and hot sauce. Seems like a big portion. It's only 980 calories for all that food. Or I could eat a double Baconator with cheese, and I'm going to get roughly the same. I think that's somewhere around 750 to 800 calories. Significantly less volume, more calories. So that's what we're talking about when people say calorically dense versus nutrient dense, and where the term empty calories came from. They're not good or bad. It's just worth knowing what's in the food that you're eating. Another example is, I get people that, my favorite example of a nutritional client that was assigning morality to food was talking about, good fats versus bad fats. And when we get to macronutrients, you'll see why this was a big deal. But the idea was that olive oil is a good fat. So she cut out all salad dressings and just ate salad with olive oil. But you have to look at the serving size. And I believe a serving of olive oil is 1 tablespoon. Might be 2. I don't recall. She was doing 6 tablespoons per salad, and she's doing that for lunch and dinner. Did the math, that is roughly 1,200 calories from olive oil. That's a lot. So, again, that's from something that was supposedly a good fat. So, again, let's get rid of the idea of good and bad. It's just energy. Mentioned macronutrients earlier. When we talk about different kinds of calories, the only two kinds are lowercase c and a capital C. One is a factor of the other. Other than that, it's the same. It's a unit of measure. It is standard by definition. So where does the confusion come in? We're talking about sources of calories, which come from macronutrients. So, we talked about micronutrients, vitamins, and minerals. Macronutrients are nutrients that have a caloric value. 1 gram of protein contains 4 calories. 1 gram of carbohydrates also contains 4 calories. 1 gram of fat is 9 calories, and alcohol is technically the 4th macronutrient, which is 7 calories per gram. Gets a little bit more complicated than that, but this is where the idea that fat is bad came from, because you're getting more calories per gram than you would from carbohydrates or from protein. We need to talk about macronutrient absorption and the thermic effect of food. And we're going to get to the calorie balance equation, which is calories in minus calories out, equates to changes in your body stores. One piece of the calories out equation is often called the thermic effect of food is often considered part of the calories out piece of that equation. I prefer to think of it as part of the calories in. What is the thermic effect of food? You need to expend energy to extract energy from the food that you eat. So the more fibrous the food is that I'm eating, the more energy I need to take to extract calories from that food. So if we look at protein, depending on the source, if I have a really tough source like venison jerky, where it's really tough to chew, it takes a fair amount of energy to extract calories from that protein source. So if I'm eating 100 grams of protein, 100 calories worth of protein, which would be 25 grams, 100 divided by 4, I'm going to spend anywhere between 15 and 30 calories to extract the 100 calories from that protein. So I'm netting 70 to 85 calories, depending on the source. If it's something like whey protein, I'm probably absorbing 85 out of those 100 calories. So that's why I like to think of this as part of the calories in. It's not just the calories that you eat, it's the calories that you absorb. So these would be your net calories from protein. Out of 100 calories, you're getting between 70 and 85. Carbohydrates are a little easier to break down, depending on the source. The more fibrous, the more calories it takes to break them down. So out of 100 calories of carbohydrates, also 25 grams, 4 calories per gram, I will absorb 90 to 95 of those calories. Doesn't take much energy to break down fat at all. In fact, if you're in a caloric surplus and you're eating a lot of dietary fat, it's really easy to turn that fat into adipose tissue, which is where the idea that fat makes you fat came from, and launched the whole low-fat movement, which was a god-awful mess. So, I am netting between 97 and 100% of the calories that I eat from fat. Doesn't take much to break it down. So, again, the idea that all calories are not equal is incorrect. People are conflating calories themselves with the net calories that you absorb from the different food sources. So I hope that clears that up. Again, a calorie is a unit of measure. They're not good or bad, they just are. And different sources of calories net different amounts, but the unit of energy is still the same. So practically speaking, what happens here is we see people that if they increase their protein intake and don't do much else, let's say they keep their total calories the same, but a greater portion, the total calories they're eating the same, but a greater portion of those calories come from protein, you may see a slight weight loss because you're netting, you're not absorbing as many of those calories. Thermic effect of food comes into play. Practical considerations. We mentioned the calorie equation. Changes in body stores. That's how much energy your body is storing. Again, calories are a unit of energy. Calories in minus calories out. And there are so many people out there that fight this tooth and nail. They think that they are eating fewer calories than they are burning, and they can't lose weight. So they always push, it's got to be the hormones, or not all calories are equal. And there's just this frustration at an inability to lose weight. And people try to throw this out the window. They're like, that's clearly wrong. No, this is a fundamental law of physics. It's the first law of thermodynamics. We can't throw it out the window. I wish I could overwrite the laws of physics. I would love to be able to fly, but I'm not Superman. I don't defy gravity. It is a physical law. We cannot overcome it. And in terms of how much you have in your body stores, 1 pound of adipose tissue, so 1 pound of fat, is 3,500 calories. Why is this significant? If you go in a caloric deficit, generally what's recommended is a daily deficit of 200 to 500 calories a day. If I'm doing 500 calories a day and I'm truly in a deficit, which is what we're going to get to in a bit, if I'm truly in a deficit of 500 calories, then in a week I will burn 1 pound of fat, so I can lose 1 pound a week. So where does the confusion come from? Again, the calories inside of the equation, this guy, is calories absorbed, which is the calories eaten minus the thermic effect of food. So I'm not absorbing all the calories that I eat. That's kind of a good thing. Calories out is the really confusing part of this equation. It is your basal metabolic rate, which is all of the essential functions of your body. Basically, if I laid in bed all day and did nothing, that's how many calories I would burn. That's what's going on to keep me alive. Plus purposeful exercise, plus what we call NEAT, which is non-exercise activity thermogenesis. You don't need another meaning of that, but it's things like fidgeting. You know, if you're talking on the phone and you end up pacing, we generally include light walking in there, which is why step count is important, and we'll get to that in our practical example. But all of that combines into your calories out. And a lot of people think they're eating in a caloric deficit when they're really not. Why? Because your basal metabolic rate can change. It's also very hard to estimate in the first place, and no two people are the same. Your NEAT can also change. It's also hard to estimate. And your body has feedback loops. So as I'm losing weight, my basal metabolic rate is going to drop. So it changes that way. A good example of this is, an extreme example of this, the one that I like to use, is if you think about a anorexic teenage female who is in an extreme caloric deficit. She will often lose her ability to menstruate. And that is the body diverting energy from a non-essential function. So menstruation would be a secondary function. That's your part of your reproductive cycle. The primary function of your body is to keep you alive. The secondary function is arguably to propagate the species. So you are diverting the secondary function in exchange for the first function. It's not uncommon that an anorexic woman would lose her period because the body is just trying to survive and stay alive. So you see things, if you're in an extreme deficit, and I've dealt with this, men lose their sex drive. You may see a degradation in skin quality, hair quality, nails, all of that. Non-essential bodily functions for survival. Energy is diverted, and your metabolic rate slows. So you're burning many fewer calories there. You're also less likely to fidget. You're going to have less energy. You're not going to walk around as much. So NEAT will change if you're in an extreme caloric deficit. When it comes to exercise, calorie trackers are often overestimating how many calories you're burning. It was always fun when I would go running with a heart rate monitor on, my heart rate monitor would tell me that I had burned one number of calories. Then, that was linked with Polar Beats app. And then you also had Google Fitness or Google Health, whatever it's called now. And that gave a different estimation. And then the machine, if you're running on a treadmill, will give you a third estimation. They're all different. They often overestimate how many calories you burn during an exercise session. So if all of these are potentially wrong, how the hell can we tell if we're in a deficit? What we want to do is try to calculate our maintenance calories. And again, I didn't go over this with the calories in piece, so I'm going to go over that now. When it comes to the food you eat, it is the numbers on a food label, people argue, have a margin of error of 25%. And I'm going to be sort of splitting hairs here. Those food labels are accurate. Where the inconsistency comes into play is what is actually in the bag. And, when it comes to something like chicken, the nutrition facts for chicken are accurate. If I burn a gram of chicken, I know how many calories that's going to generate. The trouble is there are so many different processes when it comes to how chicken is packaged. You have water-cooled versus air-cooled. I may have more water inside of the chicken that I'm cooking, and it might make it taste better. It might be nice and juicy as opposed to a bone-dry piece of chicken. But that's going to throw off my weight measurements if I'm trying to weigh my food. So again, even the calories in piece is an estimation, and the calories out piece is an estimation. So does anybody really know what the hell is going on when it comes to caloric intake and output? Not really. What we do is we try to make a best guess. So when it comes to calculating our maintenance calories, the way we do that is we combine exercise, NEAT, and BMR together, and that gives us a multiplier. How do we do that? When it comes to exercise, I'm going to use a number between 10 and 22. And that depends on the type of exercise that I'm doing. And again, this is an estimation. So what I like to use is if I don't exercise at all, I'm not doing any purposeful exercise, my multiplier is 10. On the opposite end of the spectrum, if I'm a professional athlete and I'm training 4 to 5 hours a day, or multiple times a week, we're talking 5-6 hours or 5-6 days per week, I'm going to be up at 22. So these would be your Michael Phelps, your CrossFit Games athletes who are training multiple sessions, and that's your professional athlete, that's your job. Somewhere in between would be a casual exerciser. Let's say somebody going to the gym and they're doing an hour of purposeful exercise per day. So if I'm doing 1 hour of exercise 5 days a week, I would use between 12 and 13 as my initial multiplier there. For our example down here, I'm using a 200-pound male, 1 hour of exercise 5 days a week, and I opted for 12 instead of 13. Why? Let's assume that this person is strength training. If I'm in the gym for an hour, I am not working for that entire hour. If I'm doing an hour on the elliptical, that is 1 hour of continuous exercise, and there I would use 13. So even the amount of time that I'm in the gym, in this example, not exercising the whole time. So we use the lower end. Then we want to take in NEAT. So steps, if I'm less than 10,000, I'm going to use 0.5. If I'm less than 5,000, I'm going to use 0. So let's break it up this way. 0 to 5,000 would be 0. 5 to 10,000 would be 0.5. 10 to 15,000 would be 1. And if I'm extremely active, I can go all the way up to 2. I add that to the multiplier that comes from my exercise. So in this case, roughly 10,000 steps a day, 1 hour of exercise 5 days a week. That gives me 12.5 as my multiplier. Where does the BMR come into play? We're just going to multiply that by body weight, and we get roughly the maintenance calories. Again, I am estimating here. And this is honestly what all the calorie tracking apps do. MyFitnessPal, if you use that to calculate your calories, this is what it starts with for maintenance. And then if you put in how much weight you want to lose and in what time frame, it puts you into a deficit from here, generally of 200 to 500 calories per day. If you're trying to go lose a shitload of weight in a very short amount of time, it's going to put you even lower than that. But this is what we want to do to figure out what you're at for maintenance calories. So basically what it takes to maintain your current body weight. From here, eat like you are normally. Just eat normally and monitor the scale from week to week. If there's no change from week to week, and you're going to have daily fluctuations based on salt intake, sleep can affect it. For women, where you are in your menstrual cycle can affect it. That's why we say monitor week to week, not necessarily day to day. If you really want to get into the nitty gritty and do day to day, that's fine. If you are in a deficit, that scale will be trending down over time. If you are in a surplus, that scale will be trending up. When you look at daily fluctuations, it's moving up and down. There we go. There's my finger. We want to look at the trend line over time. And you're going to have it trending one way or the other. So when we do our nutrition challenges, this is more or less what we do to calculate people's maintenance, and then we assign either a deficit or a surplus depending on their goals. And what we find is, as we monitor the scale, I've numerous times had people that we do this calculation and they're at maintenance even though they're supposed to be in a deficit. So we adjust and we lower their intake by 200 calories a day. And that might be enough to push the scale in. So what does that mean? It means that our estimation was wrong. Maybe their BMR is a little bit lower than we anticipated. Maybe they are not always getting in the steps that they say they're getting in. Maybe they are not actually exercising an hour, it's 45 minutes. There are so many variables. The best that we can do is estimate and monitor the scale, and that's going to tell us what we need to know from week to week. The downside of that is that people tend to fixate on the scale, and the other downside is that we cannot lose weight indefinitely. And as we already said, your BMR will change. If you are in a chronic caloric deficit, your BMR slows down and you will no longer be in a caloric deficit. So when you're trying to lose a ton of weight, generally we say you're not going to lose more than 10% of your body weight at a given time. I wouldn't try to do it. It's dangerous. That's when you can really screw up your metabolism. Again, that's screwing up your BMR. You want to go for about 12 weeks. So 3 months in a deficit, watching the weight trend down, hold that weight, start gradually eating a little bit more, again, monitor the scale. You'll find that a lot of times you can eat a little bit more than you were to lose the weight, and you'll still maintain. And again, that's going to start increasing your BMR again at that lower body weight. You do that for 8 weeks. You go now into another 12-week deficit if you're trying to lose more weight, or you don't. But we are predisposed to gain weight over time as a survival mechanism. You know, we had our ancestors were hunter-gatherers, and they had periods of feast and periods of famine. Bodies want to absorb that energy and hold it so that in periods of famine we could survive. And life expectancy was low. So extrapolate that over a longer lifespan and you see how we can easily gain weight as we age. Monitoring the scale is the way to combat that. Just don't obsess over it. It's just a number. What's more important is how you feel and how your clothes are fitting. And for some people, how they look. If that's important to you, then great. But that is how you monitor this and adjust over time. You do 12 weeks of loss, 8 weeks of maintenance, 12 weeks of loss, 8 weeks of maintenance, until you're down to where you want to be. Now, that being said, I already said you can't lose weight indefinitely, and I hope that's obvious, but for some people it's not. I don't know why. If you take this to the extreme, then if we could lose weight indefinitely, then we would eventually weigh 0 pounds. Seems ridiculous, but that's where we would trend. So, what does this all mean? There's no such thing as good and bad calories. They're just a unit of energy. All calories are equal. What is not equal is the amount that you absorb from different foods. It is very difficult to estimate calories in. It is difficult to estimate calories out. So the only way to figure out if you're in the right ballpark is to start with that number, track what you're doing, and monitor the scale. Hormones, all that other stuff, that factors into your BMR. That's part of the calorie equation. Anyone that tells you that calories don't matter is incorrect. If they're talking about it's hormones that are more important, again, that's only part of the equation. They have a point, but calories still matter. We cannot override the laws of physics. Hope that was helpful. Hope that cleared up a lot. Went on a little long this time, but it's a dense topic. So be it. If you like this, feel free to share it with people that you think could benefit from it. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, and we'll catch you guys next week.